Hi, it's James Harrison. It's time for Tip Tuesday, and we're going to continue. I guess you would call this part 3 of tips for school jazz band drummers. And there's going to be a little bit of some signs I made up for today. The first one is when you see straight notes like 1, 2, and 3, 4, and written, what it means is to play that swing. Because oftentimes it'll write it in straight time and it'll just say swing. Or sometimes it'll say equals and it'll show like a triplet, sometimes even a dotted eighth and a 16th, but most of the time it's triplet oriented. So if it's a swing tune and it's written straight, the idea is to play it swing. So you see up top, I have 1, 2, and 3, 4, and it means 1, 2, let 3, 4, let. So basically what that means is instead of playing, you would swing that. Now I know that seems very basic to some of you, but for a lot of beginners, they don't understand that. They just go straight to the ink and try to play what's written. When you're reading jazz charts, so much of it is not what's on the page in terms of ink. Okay? Another thing, we have a lot of slashes. Sometimes it says play time and it just shows slashes like this. Time slashes basically mean to keep time, to play jazz time. It could be rock, it could be funk, based on the type of the tune. A slash is there for every beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, this is in 4/4 time. So time slashes would basically mean you play that ride pattern if it's jazz. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You keep time. If it's a rock thing, you would play 1, 2, 4. Okay, I know it sounds weird because of the pads on here, but that's just to keep it semi-quiet. Okay, I'll turn the snares up on this again. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You play time. Okay, that's all that means. So a time slash means to play time. Sometimes as a shorthand method, instead of writing out 8 bars of slashes, which you'll often see, sometimes after the 4th one, they'll put a 4 above it, or they'll put an 8 to let you know where you are, that it's 8 bars. But oftentimes you'll see a shorthand method that does something like this. It'll say play 8 with slashes. That means you're playing 8 bars of time. Another method is what you see below. In the middle of the stat, it'll often say 8 bars X. So you're playing 8 bars of time. Sometimes it'll say 8X, meaning 8 more bars or whatever. So it's just extra bars of time. Again, it's a very shorthand method. Another thing that's important in this shorthand method, if you want to call it that, in reading jazz charts, and it comes to timekeeping, you'll see something like this. So it says timekeeping, and it says 4x with a little apostrophe s, 4 times. So that means you're going to play that bar for 4 bars of time, or play that bar 4 times. 8 bars of time, 16 bars of time. So in literally, in the space of an inch to 1.5 inches on a page, you could have 16 bars of time written when you see something like this. So just remember that if you see a 4XS, 4 times, 8XS, 8 times, 16 times if you see a 16. Another shorthand method for chart reading. Okay, well, you also get that same type of situation when it comes to rest. Instead of writing out a measure of rest, a measure of rest, a measure of rest, a shorthand method for writing rest in jazz charts is something like this. They'll just, inside the measure, they'll just put 1 giant rest and write a number above it. In this case, it's 8. So that means you would rest for 8 bars. Do not play for 8 bars. You could see 4 bars above that, 2 bars above that, 16 bars, or whatever. You will see shorthand method, 8 bars of rest. Okay, so it's just, again, something that school jazz band drummers kind of need to learn that. Okay, and lastly, another thing. Now, before I put this last one up, it's very important that any school band member learn and understand the basics of reading music and the basics of a roadmap, be it a concert piece, orchestral piece, or whatever. You do need to know what a repeat sign is. You do need to know what a coda is, and a del segno sign, or sometimes DSL coda, okay? I'm trying to think of some other ones that you might run into. What tacit means, what we often, there's a bunch more I could get into, but they're not super common in some of the jazz charts. So I'm not going to get into all of the things, but just really the basics of repeat signs and the basics of codas and the difference between DC and DS. All that is important, and you need to know that. In jazz charts, there's a lot of roadmaps that just cut back and forth that you don't get a lot of in concert-oriented music. And another shorthand thing that you see is something that looks like a percent sign in the middle of a measure, something like this. And it basically means to repeat the previous measure. And sometimes you'll see one measure written out and then 7 of these in a row, meaning repeat the previous measure 7 times. Sometimes you'll see that. And like the second one you see here, sorry about that, the second one you'll notice, it says, it has 2 bars with 2 slashes on the percent sign and a 2 above it. It means repeat the 2 previous measures. So instead of one measure, you're repeating not one measure 2 times, but the 2 previous measures. You repeat them again. And then also you can see repeat 4 previous measures. If you see that percent sign with 4 slashes, and 4 bars in it, it means to repeat the previous 4 bars. The previous 4 measures are repeated again to create an 8-bar phrase. Okay, not to repeat the measure 4 times, repeat the previous 4 measures. So the percent sign looking thing like that on the top here, where my finger is pointing, means to repeat the previous measure. If you have a 2 above it with 2 slashes, repeat the 2 previous measures. With 4 is repeat the 4 previous measures. These are all important signs. Now there are lots of other little things we can get into in another video, where sometimes you might see eyeglasses or things like that to mean watch this area, or you might see cues and it might say, specifically very common in stage music. What I mean by that is playing musicals or Broadway shows or things like that, where they'll write a cue because you'll have so many bars of rest. You'll even see this in some orchestral music where they'll write a cue like oboe playing something, and then, oh, that's where we are. Now you can kind of stand up and get ready to do your part, or you don't have to count 102 measures just to come in. So anyway, just a quick synopsis of some of the important things you need to know for reading or interpreting, I guess I should say, the jazz charts when you're in like a junior high situation or a high school situation. Again, I've said this in some of the other videos. What you get as a piece of music, and often other members of the rhythm section get this as well. It's not so much you play exactly on the page, the ink. It's a roadmap that you need to learn to interpret, and then you play the style that's appropriate. Okay, so when you're thrown into the jazz band situation, it's very important that you listen to jazz, funk, Latin, and all the styles of music that you're going to have to interpret and be able to play. Sometimes they'll give you a little bit of a guideline as to what you're playing in terms of a beat, but oftentimes they won't. So it'll just say Latin generically, and you have to know whether it's Cuban, you have to know whether it's Brazilian, or something from Trinidad, like a calypso oriented or soca oriented or something like that. It's very difficult if you don't listen to those kinds of music to understand. And each of those genres of music have many different styles inside. We'll get into that in some lessons down the road. Anyway, there's part 3, a little bit more of some of these signals or roadmaps you need to understand for jazz band.